Welcome back to the Communication Mastery podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. This is where we unleash the power of understanding to build bridges and not boxes, because we understand that communication is the oxygen of teamwork. We all need communication to thrive in life and work. And in this podcast, we want to increase your communication mastery so that we can all learn to adapt to one another and be effective in our communication. So thanks for being here. Let's learn together. Welcome back. And this week we've got a question and response week. So I got some of your questions here. Always love getting your questions and love to pull them together. Sometimes I'll just throw one in an episode. Other times we'll take a whole episode like this to answer some of those questions. And as usual, I'm going to make them anonymous. I've maybe grouped them together into some themes. So your specific question may not be here in detail, but that's because this is responses to questions, not answers to questions. If you've got a specific situation in your business or in your life where you need a specific answer, feel free to always reach out to me. Be glad to help you with some coaching on those specific questions. But sometimes these general questions can be very valuable for all of us to learn together. And so let's jump right in here. Some of these are kind of foundational questions for small business communication. And the first one truly is, it's this: why is communication often the hidden key to small business success? And my answer to that would be, from my experience at least, is that in a small business, you're so busy trying to cover so many different areas, you forget to focus on the one area that can really make a difference to all of those other areas, and that is communication. If I'm so distracted by accounts receivable or so worried about the deliveries or just focused on how to get more clients and how to push my sales team to work faster, all of those different things, I can forget that communication is actually vital in all of those areas. And if I invest just a little bit of time, a little bit of energy in improving communication, then I'll see an improvement right across the board, because it's one of those situations where a rising tide lifts all the ships. And so communication is so often the area that I see that small business owners miss. But I've also seen settings where small business owners have seen great improvement in all of their other metrics by making communication a key performance indicator for their business. And so when you're dealing with people, because all business is dealing with people, communication is the oxygen that makes that work. Whether it's building your team of employees, or if maybe you're a solopreneur and you want to interact with your clients or your customers, in each of those settings, you've got to communicate in order to convey what your business does, what the value is you can offer, to hear from people what they need from you. All of those things are communication. And so making the investment in communication is always going to benefit across the rest of your small business success. Second question is kind of related to that. It's what does effective communication really look like in a small business setting? And I would say effective communication is the communication that achieves the goal that you're aiming for. So you're making a connection with the person or the people that you're communicating with in a way that they can receive fully what you have to offer and what you have to say, but also you can hear fully and completely what do they need and how do they need it. Those two questions are so vital. And again, we can get so distracted by what our own skills are that we lose the skill of listening to those that we're working with or those that we're serving, so that we can be everything that they need rather than just some of what they need. So effective communication is adaptation to the specific situation. I think of some of the small business owners that I know. Some of them sound like a recording when you interact with them. They're always saying the same thing. They're always doing the same thing. And then I know others who are very present and very connected in whatever setting they're in. I've seen them talking with groups of people in a different way to the way they talk with an individual. I've seen them interacting with different generations in different ways, or different cultures in different ways, and they've learned the skill of adapting. Effective communication is the communication that works for this specific setting, this specific need, this specific moment. And so in a small business setting, that's a difficult thing to achieve until you invest in understanding how communication works. And that's why I love what I do, because I'm helping small business owners to navigate that minefield without getting blown up. It is simple to learn it initially, and then just by practicing, it's a little bit like driving a car. There are some basic principles that you need to learn, and then the more you drive, the better it gets, the easier it gets. Third question is, how can small business owners develop a communication style that fits their brand and culture? And again, you'd expect me to say this, but the key thing is to understand yourself. What is your business culture? What is your brand? What are you offering? What makes you unique? How can you zero in on your unique niche, your clarity of why you exist? It's very tempting, especially in small business, to try to be everything to everyone, and that's actually the fast track to failure. If you focus in on what do I offer that's unique, what sets me apart from those around me, where do I get the most positive feedback from customers about the things that I do? Even as I answer this question, I'm thinking of all kinds of local businesses that I've interacted with or I've worked with. When they know that they're doing something that's different from others around them, when they know that the feedback they get from their customer base is affirming certain areas of what they have to offer, when they've learned to press into those areas and really mine them for what they can learn, those businesses thrive, because then their communication flows out of their clarity. Clarity informs communication, and clarity makes communication effective. So the communication style will be different for, I don't know, a bakery and coffee shop that's all about people dropping in and sitting around and chatting and being friendly. The way you're going to communicate some of those goals is going to be very different from, say, a coaching company that wants to help people become more effective in a specific field. Or it would be very different for a lawyer. You want to display competence and strong reviews for your results as an attorney, whereas you don't really want to convey competence and confidence in your output if you're a cafe. You want it to be friendly and welcoming. So the communication style has to flow from a clarity of what am I really doing? What is my goal? What is my purpose? Why do I exist? Why is my business different from those around me? How am I differentiated from the competition? And if you're not clear on that, it's vital that you do that exercise first before working on your communication style. Otherwise, you're trying to use someone else's, you're trying to walk in someone else's shoes. And very often that'll lead to soreness and blisters. It won't work. So those are some of the foundational questions. Let's talk a bit more about branding and messaging and clarity. That kind of flows from that previous question, but here's another question. How do you make sure your message is clear, whether that's internally with your team or externally with your customers? How do you make sure your message is clear? And I'd say that the first key to measuring your clarity is your metrics. What sort of level of engagement are you getting? What results are you getting? Maybe you've got a TV ad for some special promotion that you're running. Well, are you getting results with that ad? Maybe you're on social media and you're communicating similar things that are, in your eyes, consistent with your brand. Are you getting engagement from your followers? Are you increasing your followers? What are the metrics around what you're communicating? So that you can then tweak the message. If you have email marketing, for example, very often your email marketing client will let you trial two different subject lines in the email, A/B testing, they call it. So you can put out two different subject lines to the email and see what the open rate is with both. Am I clearly conveying what I want people to see? Because in our fast-paced society, you've only got a split second to make an impact enough that someone will follow through. In other cases, maybe you're on social media and you can look at the metrics for your videos, say. You may have hundreds of people watching them, but if they're only watching the first 3 seconds and then moving on to something else, that's an increasing challenge these days, then they're not getting the point you made at 20 seconds in to complete your 30-second video with your call to action. They're missing the call to action because something's missing at the beginning. So you want to be sure you're responding to the metrics, you're responding to the feedback. Don't just be data driven though. Also look at your interactions with the customers or even then with your team as well. Obviously, most of what I've just talked about is external with your customers. Internally and externally, you also need to look at the relationships, the personal interactions to see, is this working? Is this landing? Is this moving us in the direction we want to go? Again, if it's not, then we need to figure out why that is. And very often it will come down to not using the full range of communication styles in the communication strategy. Don't try and use every one of those 7 different communication languages in one communication, but over the course of maybe a team meeting, or over the course of a social media campaign, or over the course of a client meeting, you want to make sure you're touching on all 7 of the different communication styles so that you're making a connection on all the different levels. It's kind of like making all the connections in an electrical circuit. It may be that you've got the live wire connected, but if the ground isn't connected or the return isn't connected, then you don't have a circuit and the light doesn't come on. You need to make sure you're connecting on all the different levels in order for your message to come across clearly. So to some degree, it's the same internally and externally. You're looking for, is this landing? Is this working? And if it's not, what can I learn from what's not working? But on the external level with customers, you also need to apply it to your external marketing efforts as well. Another area on clarity and messaging, I'm glad I made this anonymous, but somebody asked a great question here. What's the difference between talking at people and actually communicating with them? My twisted sense of humor would say that talking at people is a podcast, whereas communicating with them is a conversation. I recognize that in these episodes I am talking at you, but that's why I love to get your feedback. I love for you to answer me, text me, use the link in the show notes to get back to me. But talking at people is where I've put down active listening. It's where I've lost sight of my goal for communication, and it's where I'm simply focused on myself and on my needs, my desires, my hopes. And then all I'm doing is talking at someone. And actually, you know what? That puts people off. That reduces communication, doesn't increase it. There's nothing worse than somebody who won't stop talking, especially if they're repeating themselves in order to try and get their message across. Communication is always two-way. That's why the episode on active listening that you can find in the show reel is so important. You have one mouth and 2 ears for a reason. You need to listen twice as much as you speak. And so if you find yourself speaking all the time, other than in a podcast setting like this, then you're not actually communicating. Communication is always two-way. I say something, then you listen and you respond. I listen to what you respond, and then I respond to that. And again, as we said in the active listening episode, you always want to be listening to hear rather than listening to react. And that's a vital difference. So that's the difference between talking at people and actually communicating with them. On an external customer level, there's another facet of this, and that is that you've got to be able to connect with your customer's point of need, their pain point, if you like. So just telling them what you offer isn't going to achieve sales success. Instead, telling them, or rather acknowledging what their pain point is, what their need is, and then offering what you have to meet that need is always going to be more effective. You need to understand your audience so that you can have a two-way communication, even in marketing efforts like that. American business wastes billions of dollars every year on miscommunication. If you're ready to change that trend, invest in Communication IQ today, because it will give you a great return in terms of employee alignment, retention, customer engagement, profitability, sales outcomes. All of those areas will grow as you understand the science of communication. So go to my website at markburlinson.com, click on the business button, and let's have an introductory chat today about how I can help your business be more productive by enhancing communication. And the next question under this grouping is, how can a small business use storytelling to build trust with clients and customers? I love this question because it's so perceptive. The power of story is so often underestimated. You can build connection far more quickly and far more deeply with a story than you can with a statement. And so I always encourage small businesses especially to tell the story of what they're doing and of what the effect is of what they're doing. So it's far better to, I mean, suppose you're a retail store, it's far better to tell the story of how, I don't know, a lady came in and bought this particular garment that you've got on special offer this month because she wanted to wear it to a special occasion, or how valuable the gardening tool that you're promoting this week, how valuable that was to one of your customers because they were able to do something in their yard that they weren't able to do before. Telling those kinds of stories is always more effective than saying, hey, look at how good this thing is at doing what it does, and it's only this much this week. That sort of simple statement, we're kind of hardwired to filter those things out, but stories draw us in because they're invitational. We want to hear what happened next. We want to understand what happened to this other person. It draws on the power of connection and relationship so that the people you want to reach are more receptive to what you're saying, to what you're offering. And so the telling of stories that had good outcomes will always build trust with clients and with customers. Maybe it's a service industry story. The way that you were able to help somebody resolve a problem, or the way you were able to help them overcome a challenge in their business by offering your services. Those kinds of stories always help to bring to you others who face not just the same problem, but similar problems or even comparable problems, because it shows that you are trustworthy. And trust in business is such an important commodity. Storytelling always builds trust. It's important to be honest. So you don't want to just tell the glowing 100% success stories. It's also very valuable to tell stories that are maybe 75% success, 25% challenges and obstacles that you had to overcome together. Don't tell the stories that are like 25% success and 75% failure. Those are things that you learn from rather than things that you communicate to your potential customers. But use of story is probably one of the most underrated ways of increasing your sales, your customer engagement, the trust that your clients put in you, and your profile as a trusted expert or a trusted resource in whatever field you're in. So a lot of that was external. The third grouping that I want to finish up with for today is more about team culture and internal communication. Again, I've got 3 questions here that different ones have sent in. So here's the first of those internal communication questions. What are common communication breakdowns in small teams, and how can you fix them? There are several that spring to mind. The first communication breakdown is where different members of the team are wired in different ways and communicate in different ways, and they unwittingly press each other's buttons or trigger each other's distress flares by the way that they communicate. So the first communication breakdown, I'd say, would be by not adapting to each other's preferred communication styles in an interaction. And so suppose you've got somebody who's very action oriented and they stay only in the action category of communication, then that's always going to cause difficulties, particularly for those who are more thought oriented, the more cognitive communicators. But it'll also cause issues for those who are more emotively wired, because it looks like you don't care. It looks like you haven't thought about it. You're just getting on with it. Or conversely, maybe you're strong in one of the areas of cognitive communication where you're all about strategy, and you just use strategy in your communication with your teammates or with your employees or even with your boss, and depending on the situation, that can come across as uncaring, or it can come across as all talk, no action, if you're only looking at the steps to take and not actually taking any of them. So those kinds of misunderstandings can often be one of the biggest communication breakdowns, is where the team members don't understand each other. I can think of countless examples when I've worked with small businesses where I've produced for them a sort of simple 1-page summary of the unique communication styles or profiles of each of the team members, and you kind of put it on the wall or stick it on your desk. So when you know you're going to interact with someone who's different from you, you can remind yourself, oh, this person needs to know that the emotive areas are in my mind as I'm thinking about how to communicate, or these action areas are important to this person. They want to make sure that they get things done. So I need to be sure we're looking at short-term goals and things that can be achieved in a certain amount of time, rather than just talking about generic concepts or deep insights. There's not enough action in that. I need to introduce some action. So it's almost like you have a recipe for interacting with each person. Some people like their coffee with all of the flavors and all of the frills. Other people like their coffee just straight out of the pot, black with nothing added. Those kinds of differences apply in communication as well. So communication breakdown is very often a common issue of not understanding one another in the way we're wired. And then the second cause or source of communication breakdown is a failure to listen actively. If we are simply reacting or responding without receiving what the person's communicating, then we can so easily miss each other. And so when you have, and I hope your teams are like this, ideally, the different communication styles and the different communication wirings of each member of your team will begin to blend together to create a kind of interweaving of strength. But when we don't actively listen and we don't receive what the other is offering, then that what should be an interweaving and creating strength becomes a missing and a colliding, where we don't blend, but we obstruct. We create obstacles. And that's the other reason for communication breakdown. That's something I find myself helping businesses with quite often. It's like, hey, do you see that the way you are receiving this is putting an obstacle to communication? Or do you see that the way you're continuing to communicate this creates that obstacle? If we tweak it in this way or change it in that way, now you can bring your strengths together and turn differences into strengths. So that's the second reason for communication. There's plenty of others, but those two would be the biggest ones, I think. And how you fix them is you pull in somebody else from outside to help you see what you can't see. That doesn't have to be me, or it could be, but even somebody else within the team can often see what needs to be seen, particularly if you've invested a bit of time in understanding communication IQ and availing yourself of that body of knowledge so that you can apply it. Another question about team culture and internal communication. It's often very challenging to a small business owner to receive feedback. And that's what this question, I think, is rooted in. How can small business owners foster honest feedback without creating fear or conflict? Good question. First off, if you are the owner, you need to teach yourself to see feedback as very valuable. Too often, particularly if all of our resources and all of our energy is taken up with just keeping things going, because it often can be in a small business, we don't allow ourselves the time to receive feedback and reflect on it, to know what can it teach me. And so there's a fear there that if I allow feedback, all we'll end up doing is kind of, griping with each other about the things that I'm doing wrong, or moaning about the fact that things aren't working the way they should. Whereas actually we can learn from feedback if we'll make room for it. Sometimes feedback does create conflict if it's offered in a way that's not helpful and not constructive. Feedback always needs to be constructive. We need to avoid the you always, you never approach to feedback. Rather say, I find this, or I experience that when this happens. And can we talk about that so that we can change that? One of the things that I coach small teams on especially is looking at the distress that comes when my communication needs are not being met. Rather than simply living in the distress that comes from those communication languages, maybe accusing others or withdrawing, rather than staying in those distress flares, I need to turn those distress flares into an expression of need. I need to understand this, or I need to experience that, or I need help with this aspect of our communication or this aspect of your feedback in order that I can receive it and apply it effectively. So turning that around creates an openness, because it's saying, I have a need. And most of us will respond positively to somebody honestly saying, I have a need. We want to meet one another's needs, but so often we've missed the skill of understanding how to ask for that help, and then how to offer that help in a way that's adapted to the person who's asking for help, rather than simply rooted in how I'm wired or how I prefer to do that. So business owners can foster honest feedback by having some kind of regular team meeting where they model what they're looking for. So you're inviting feedback about yourself and about the business as a whole, which is giving your team permission to speak into what is really your wheelhouse, your area of responsibility, because then you can encourage your team members to then welcome the same kind of feedback into their areas. They may be less significant or they may be less visible, but they'll begin to learn that openness and that honesty from the leader's example. And if you do run into fear or you do run into conflict, again, it can be helpful to bring in somebody who's neutral to help you resolve some of that. I'm working with one business right now where we're talking a lot about conflict and how to handle it rightly, not to remove it, because there should always be some degree of conflict in a team. If there's no conflict, it means that everybody on the team is basically the same, and now you're not getting the benefit of having a team. The differences in a team will always be valuable, provided they are turned into strengths rather than being left creating conflicts. And sometimes it takes somebody from outside to help you do that. And so again, if that's a situation you're in, maybe you're the person who asked the question, then reach out to me privately. Tell me a little bit about it. Let's see if we can help you to resolve that in a fruitful way. One last question here before we wrap it up for today. What's the role of daily check-ins or team huddles, and how do you keep them from becoming a waste of time? Good question. I'm guessing from the question that you're somebody who is experiencing team huddles or daily check-ins, and to some degree they feel somewhat superfluous to what you're doing. It's like, oh, I've got to have this 15-minute check-in before I can get on with the real work. If that is the case, and again, I realize I'm jumping to conclusions from the question here, but what you need to guard against is disregarding of the value you can get from that daily check-in. Remember, we've said that communication is always two-way. Teamwork is always improved by communication. And so it may be that the team check-in or the team huddle has become a waste of time because nobody's being real. If that's the case, find a way to actually express that. It may be that you want to talk to the leader of the team huddle if you're not the leader, and just say, you know what, it feels like, or it looks like we've lost the art of being real and honest. Can we look at why that might be? Can we talk about what we might do about that? Or it may be that the leader themselves is not skilled in how to draw everybody into a team huddle and get the most out of them. So again, because we're all wired differently, we all need to be invited to contribute in different ways. Some people will clam up if you put them on the spot. Other people need to be encouraged to back away a little and leave room for others. Again, team leaders need to be skilled in communication IQ to bring the best out of their team. And so that's another area that I find myself helping teams with quite regularly. How does the leader manage that daily or weekly team check-in time in a way that every communication style has room to contribute? And there are ways, scientifically based ways to do that will enable you to make sure that nobody gets left out, but nobody gets put on the spot. And I can help you with that. A team huddle is only a waste of time if it's superficial and unreal, if it's not getting to the real facts and the real details of what the team needs to talk about. And that's on the leader. So if you are a leader of a team huddle and you feel that's where your huddle's got to, let's have a conversation about how you could change that, because it's so important that our communication be effective in the business setting so that we can achieve the return on that investment that brings more profitability, brings more fruitfulness, helps us to achieve our goals. So that's a whole bunch of different questions and responses, but I hope they've been helpful to you. We'll have another episode with a few more questions later on in the series. Until then, come back and join us next week, and thanks for being here today. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean a lot to me if you'd rate and review the podcast so it helps more listeners to find us. But also, would you give me your feedback on things you'd like to hear about in future episodes? And remember to share the episode with a friend if you see something that would benefit them as well. You can reach me with feedback through my website at markburlinson.com. Just click on the contact button and send me a message. I respond to everyone personally, and I really want to hear from you. So thank you again for listening, sharing, reviewing, and giving me your feedback.